right, gentlemen, let's talk about wealth. Wealth is one of my favorite things to talk about with respect to religion and Christianity because it is one of the things that Christian men like to shy away from. And they like to shy away from it because most of them have no wealth. It's just like masculinity. They shy away from masculinity because they aren't very masculine. That makes it something that's desirable for us to talk about. So let's talk about wealth, some ways to increase your value, and one of the most common themes of thinking that we want to get rid of as men. Money and wealth is nothing more than a metric of perceived value given by society. So if you want to increase your wealth, all you have to do is increase your value. This is very easy to understand by just looking out in the world. You can see that some careers and professions are more valuable than others. Some jobs can be performed by software, computers, and robots, while some jobs absolutely require human beings to be there to make them happen. If you want to increase your wealth, if you want to increase your money, all you have to do is increase your value. So people in the church have used money, or their lack of it, as some way to show that they are righteous. So I commonly call this people using virtue to justify poverty, meaning that Christians will suggest, I'm not rich because I'm focused on spiritual matters instead of earthly matters. Have you ever noticed that those people aren't very developed spiritually either? It's like the same people who say they'd rather have brains than brawn. It's like not only are they out of shape physically, but they have no brains either. They're out of shape mentally as well. So as a way to illustrate why the idea that you're more righteous because you're poor is faulty, let's look at some examples from the Bible. Why don't we notice two great characters from the Bible who were wealthy and had great character? The first one is Abraham, called the father of the faithful. And if we note in Genesis 13:2, it says Abraham had become very wealthy in livestock and in silver and gold. That's interesting. Why take a verse out of the Bible to talk about a man's wealth? We'll explore that in just a minute right after we introduce Job. In Job 1 and verse 3, this passage or this verse outlines Job's possessions. It says, also, his possessions were 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and a very large household, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. Two instances here where extremely righteous men have the specifics of their wealth described. Now, why do you think that is? Why do you think the Bible, which is very brief, I know some of you may not think so, but it tends to not drone on and on or go into a huge amount of detail about anything. Why would the Bible go into specific detail about these men's wealth? It's because their character is even more impressive because they have wealth. Not only are they wealthy, but they're wealthy and good men. That's something that's rare in the church. There are plenty of good men, but there aren't a ton of wealthy good men. The righteousness of these men is more impressive after you find out they're wealthy. It's not as big of a deal to be righteous when you're poor. I mean, what exactly are you going to do? You don't have anything to place above God to begin with. It's easy to be righteous when you have nothing. That's not to be rude or anything like that, but that is also one of the reasons that evangelism, mission work is more effective in poverty-ridden countries, because what else do they have besides religion? We like to portray them as more noble, but really they just don't have the distraction. Therefore, it would be more impressive if we, having all the distractions, were able to be righteous as well. Moving on, there's no need to moralize the amoral tool of money before it has been understood rationally. Religious people have to moralize everything before they even understand it. And this is a huge problem because we understand that in regular life, you have to understand something from a rational perspective, from an amoral perspective, before you can start to place moral parameters around it. For example, we're using money here. Obviously, if you have a brand new child and you're going to explain to him what money is, you don't start with the moral parameters of how you should behave with money. No, you start by explaining, okay, this is $1, it can get you this, you can trade it for this, you have to exchange this much work to get this dollar. You always start by explaining something from a material, secular, amoral perspective. If you're going to understand something, it must be understood amorally. You have to know what money is before you can know how money can be used. But people in the church want to go the opposite way. They want to start with how you should manage money before they know what money is. And they don't know what money is because they don't have any money. And the same thing applies to masculinity. Religious men have to make masculinity a moral issue because otherwise they're not masculine. If masculinity isn't moral, then most Christian men are not masculine. If being a man doesn't have anything to do with being moral and upright, then most religious males are not men. So at the end of the day, we must understand that wealth is an amoral tool and it is a gift from God if you can handle it. So the application of this principle is the following. You must build the character now that can handle great wealth later. You are a man of action and ambition, and you will likely achieve impressive success later on down the road, but you must be ready to accept that success with humility and character. You must be ready to still act generously and kindly to others and not let your wealth change you. Because it's easy for a person to be kind and of good character when they're poor and have accomplished nothing. That's easy. It's easy to be humble if you're a loser. It's easy to be able to preach about how to properly manage wealth when you have none. It is another thing entirely to be humble and generous when you're a great success. So start acting today how you envision yourself acting when you have wealth. So what's that vision of yourself for the future? We all have that vision of ourselves where we can close our eyes and see how we want to behave in situations, how we want to act in our interaction with others. It is our responsibility then to start acting now, how we envision ourselves acting in the future when we are who we want to be. So whatever our vision is, we need to act that way now, even if it's on a micro scale. So start small and simple by speaking to everyone you meet the same way. Sometimes when we talk to certain people, we'll put on airs or try to be more impressive or fancy or this, that, or the other. Let's get in the habit of speaking to everyone the same way, if for nothing more than just to take the cognitive load off ourselves of constantly having to change personalities, constantly having to be someone else in order to fit into certain people's perspective of what we should be the same with everyone. Speak to the cashier the same way you speak to the CEO. I know you've heard that probably 1 trillion times, but it is an important lesson to learn. And it's easy to think about that, just talking about it, just sitting around listening, planning. It's another thing entirely when you actually do talk to the CEO or the president of a company. Second, let's practice generosity now in the present moment, even if we don't have much to be generous with. This is one of the useful disciplines in the church, and that's the giving on the first day of the week. Now, this is something that the world uses against Christianity. They get angry that they have to, quote, pay money to God, when the reality is that this discipline of giving is voluntary. The worst thing that happens to you if you don't give in church is the guy passing around the plate gives you the death look. That's as bad as it gets. You get a little bit of judgment. You don't have to give. You're asked to give, but you can freely opt out of it, as so many people do. Maybe they don't have a scriptural basis for that, and that's for certain, but some people don't give, and they don't pay the consequences for it, at least currently. But this, in church, is an opportunity to develop that ability to be generous and to use it as a training ground to increase your generosity as you go through life. If you were raised very young, always giving, always setting aside money to give, then you'll notice that over time, maybe it takes a really long time, but eventually it becomes less painful to give, or at least that should be the goal. I know if you're like me, it took me years upon years upon years to decrease the negative emotions associated with giving. I didn't want to give. That was my hard-earned money. But eventually, after a long time, those negative thoughts, those negative attitudes started to subside. So don't rush yourself and think that you are not a good Christian, not this, that, or the other, because you're still feeling those negative emotions. Stick with the discipline itself. The proper attitudes and thoughts will come shortly behind there. So train yourself until you can give generously with no negative feelings, and then one day maybe you can even be a cheerful giver, and then you can expand that generosity to even things outside the church, becoming even more generous with your wealth. Third, increase your value to the marketplace. You cannot increase your wealth without becoming more valuable to society. It is a sad thing when a man will work for 30 years for the same company, or maybe even taking some lateral movements, going job to job, and never increases his wealth, never even increases his salary, which isn't always the best metric, but he never increases his wealth. And it's not because he doesn't work hard at his job, but because he doesn't work hard on himself. When a man does not increase his skill, and thereby does not increase his value, he will never increase his wealth. So in order to combat this, what you need to do is find out what your personality type is. Take any of the personalities tests. You can do Myers-Briggs. I would also suggest doing the Ocean personality test on top of that, and then see what your personality type is and look at the list of recommended careers for your personality. See which one of those careers interests you. It may be several, and then start reaching out to people in those careers. See if you can land an internship or some sort of apprenticeship and start working in there. Find out what you're skilled at and what you can actually increase your value by doing. Then additionally, find out how you can increase value more and more by gaining additional skill. Don't go into a profession that will limit you in how valuable you can become. Always look for ways to increase your value. But you really do have to understand your personality type, because not everyone is cut out to start a business. Even though the hustle culture, the business starting culture is the most popular push nowadays, that's not for everyone. Some people work best and provide the most value when they are an employee. So discover what your personality is, look through the list of suggested careers, and then see what interests you and pursue it. Next, avoid the bad habit of judging less successful people. And the same thing applies to masculinity. We have to get out of the habit of judging less masculine men, even though it's very tempting, and I'm not very good at that myself. It is not our responsibility to judge them. It is our responsibility to invite them to become more masculine, to push them to be better. So many people will not be materially successful, and they'll be content with that. It's not our place to judge those people unless they start pulling the, well, I'm not rich because I'm spiritual garbage. What we need to do is be so busy working on ourselves that we have no time to worry about or criticize others. And then finally, help others along the way. Get other people to help you, and you also help others on this journey of becoming more valuable to society, more wealthy, and in turn, more generous and with better character. You need mentors. You must find people in your church who are successful and still have character. I know that's extremely rare. Maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 out of every 400 to 500 people are that way. It is rare, but there will always be those souls who are incredibly valuable to society and are incredibly generous with their time and with their money. So what you need to do is find out their mentalities. What's the underlying thought process behind these men? Ask them if they will sit down with you and answer questions. Then ask them about their disciplines, their mentality, how they went about developing this character that resulted in the generous person you know today. How did they end up highly successful, yet generous and spiritual as well? Ask them everything you want to know. Remember that wealth can be temporary, but the character which gained you that wealth is permanent. So pursue character. Increase your personal value to society, and wealth will follow you. And that concludes this broadcast. Please subscribe to the channel. Share this video with your friends if you think they can handle it. In a church of 400, maybe 7 would be interested in this idea of masculinity and Christianity as we outline it here. So share it with your close circle, with people you can trust who want to improve themselves, who are aiming to increase masculinity. And also leave your comments below. Don't forget to check out the main site where 3 articles a week are currently being put up, and all that is in the description below. Thank you for listening, and as always, conduct yourselves like men.